Prairie Orchard on April the 9th, 2017, and here we are up on the Prairie Orchard, out in the apple orchard. I just wanted to show you a new tree that I planted here. The tree that was in this place was really stunted, never grew past dwarf size, and started fruiting, but the fruit never successfully grew to maturity. And that was 3 years worth of fruit that just sort of died at a very young stage. I think there was something wrong with the tree, so I have replaced it, in this case with a tree called the Orleans Renette, a French tree from around 1776. And I just popped this one right in the ground here. I finished pruning it to the shape I want as a starter tree, and I've wrapped the base to ensure that the gophers and other voles as well as deer don't get to this young tree. I also have, as I've always done, deer netting around my young trees until they get well above 6 feet. So I'm really excited about this tree. I've heard really good things about it in terms of its flavor, and I look forward to some fruit in a few years. This is always a fun time of the year to take a tour of the orchard and check out our established apple trees, and actually begin to look for the developing blossoms, just to get a sense of which trees, for example, are blossoming for the first time, but also for those trees that have blossomed before, get a sense of maybe how many fruit we may have. This tree right here is another French apple. This is our Caville Blanc d'Hiver, and as with last year, it has a ton of blossoms. You can see some of these blossoms here. Unfortunately, last year the blossoms fruited, and then all of a sudden the fruit disappeared, and I'm wondering if some sort of squirrel or animal got to them. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed this year and hope that we have a bountiful harvest from this tree, because the apples that have come from this tree in the past have really been outstanding. Here we have a praying mantis egg sac. This is up at around 6.5, almost 7 feet. That's pretty impressive in terms of height for a praying mantis egg sac. But this tree here is one of our unknown trees that has produced some large red russeted apples in the past with a brownish orange background. It has not had the same number of flowers as the Caville Blanc, but this year has a few blossoms that are taking shape. There's another one up there, there's one over there in the distance, there's one over here. So maybe a few more blossoms than have existed in the past, but not a lot more. So this is a slow starter, but the fruit, if you age them properly, are really, really tasty. This one here is our Westfield Seek No Further, an apple from Westfield, Massachusetts, and we got a few blossoms that are coming out this year, maybe 2 or 3 times more than last year. You can see that actually this is sort of a leaf bud, and then compared to the leaf bud, we have these larger, wider buds that are likely going to be fruit blossoms. There, up here, there's one in the back right there. So it looks like this tree may actually bear more fruit than last year, and last year it had maybe 2 apples that disappeared before we could actually get a chance to taste them. As the burden or the size of the harvest increases, I'm hoping that we'll be able to actually, get some fruit to maturity and taste them. Westfield Seek No Further. This tree here is our Cox Orange Pippin that has not yet bloomed in the past. I'm thinking there may be a chance of our first bloom this year, right here at the tip of this branch, but it's very possible this is just going to turn out to be leaves. But this is an example of a tree here in our orchard that was planted a little bit later and likely is going to be taking a little bit longer to start its flowering. I look forward to it. The Cox Orange Pippin is supposed to be very tasty. Here's another relatively young tree called the Kindle Synap. This is a Turkish apple, and it has pear-shaped apples, and it actually has a habit to the shape of the tree that actually is also very much like pear. It's very upright, narrow, growing tall with not a lot of width. So this was an interesting tree. I look forward to blooms in the future, but it does not appear it's going to have blooms this year. Kindle Synap. This is our Irish pippin tree, and we may actually have our first bloom ever right here. It seems like it only has one bloom on the entire tree, so a slow starter, but a sign of fruiting that is very welcome nonetheless. This is our Pitmaster pineapple that is now probably about 10 feet tall, 10 plus feet tall, despite pruning. An incredibly vigorous grower here in southwest Michigan. Despite its size, it has not fruited yet, but we may have fruit this year. Here is what potentially is a fruit bud. There's another one up there. So maybe the first signs of fruiting for the Pitmaster pineapple. And again, another praying mantis egg sac, which an even higher one up there that looks like that's at 7.5 feet tall. Which is one of the benefits of being here on the prairie. These carnivorous insects will hopefully control pests. Here we are standing with our Prairie russet, which is thought to be the oldest true American apple tree, established around the time of the early colonial period in Massachusetts. This tree actually had a blossom last year, didn't grow to maturity. We didn't get fruit. Looks like we have another blossom coming this year. We are now in the southern apple section of our orchard, and this is an apple called Pumpkin Sweet. I believe it originally was developed in Connecticut, but became a favorite down in the south. It hasn't yet had any blossoms, though this year it looks like we may have a better shot at blossoms than last year. Some of these buds look a little bit wider and more flower-like. There's another example of one right up there compared to these, which look more like blossoms, not blossoms, but buds that are going to emerge or turn into leaves. Pumpkin Sweet. This one here is our Chief Junaluska apple tree from the south as well. Because the southern section was planted later than the other trees, these are still pretty young trees, but I'm really excited to see if we get any kind of blossoms on them this year. Not terribly convinced we're going to see blossoms this year, although there are some buds like this one right here, which begin to look more and more like flower buds. And then one over here that may even be more convincing, in fact, very convincing for a flower bud. So really exciting if Chief Junaluska actually gives us a shot at one of its ugly apples. Reported to be fine tasting, but an example of an incredibly ugly apple. We could go on and on about the apples, but I thought it would be good to just come over here to the pear orchard and just take a look at what's happening here. This is that unknown pear that probably is an Anjou pear, and as you can see, it is loaded with these round buds, which are going to turn into flower blossoms. Just to show the difference between the two of them, here at the tip of this tree, we are seeing buds that look like they're going to be leaves, compared to these buds here, which are round, and we anticipate are going to give us blossoms, and then, if properly fertilized, fruit. So probably Anjou, unknown pear, but looks really healthy and productive this year. Likewise, our white Doyen pear tree is going to be quite productive. This is a little unexpected. Up to this point, it was behaving in a semi-biennial manner. It was carrying heavy fruit loads, then lighter fruit loads, but the numbers of blossoms on this tree is really impressive and may even surpass the really stellar year we had last year for fruit. So this tree must be happy and healthy for it to produce such heavy crops, or at least blossom crops, each year. The white doyen. And then a little further down our pear row is one of our two Jargonelle pear trees. This has been a vigorous grower here in southwest Michigan. Despite efforts to keep it under control, it is now over 10 feet tall. And for the first year, we actually have these blossoms coming up, and they're coming up in large numbers on these branches that are coming off the bottom half of the tree here. So we are looking to have our first harvest of Jargonelle pears this year, and actually a substantial number. In fact, I'm going to have to be careful about the fruit load on some of these branches. So the Jargonelle pear tree is doing incredible this year. Another one is just a couple trees down, and you can see in the distance those large fruit buds there in that tree as well. Jargonelle pear, thought to be a very old pear tree, potentially the parum primum mentioned by the Greeks. This here is our Dana Hovey pear tree. This is a colonial pear tree of the European variety. It had like a blossom a few years ago and then nothing last year, but looks like this year we are going to have a significant number of blossoms. So I see a difference between, for example, buds like this and then buds that look like this, or even this, which seem rounder, fuller, and there's a significant number of them on this tree. So it's quite possible we're going to have a significant number of flowers for the first time on this Dana Hovey pear tree. Exciting. In the category of plum trees, we are already seeing some blossoming action. This is a Jefferson plum that I planted 3 or 4 years ago, and it has taken off despite some pruning here. I'm going to have to cut this back this year eventually, but oh my gosh, look at the number of early blossoms on this tree. And so we may have a shot at actually developing some fruit this year. I think you'll notice actually there's some pollination already taking place. You'll see some of these Native American bees doing their work amongst these really beautiful blossoms. Jefferson plum. Beautiful tree. This one here is our wild goose plum, and it's looking like it's going to have a fair number of blossoms again this year. It hasn't really had a pollinating partner, but I think is reported to have had some self-fertilization properties, so even without a partner, it may do well. Having said that, we planted next to it a Doulin plum, and it hasn't blossomed as of yet, although it looks like given these small studs here on some of these branches, we may actually have a shot at some blooming this year, although it's hard to say. I haven't really seen this tree long enough to know what's a blossom versus a leaf bud. This tree here is a Beurre super fin pear tree, a European pear, and really wonderful news. It looks like we're going to have some flowers for the first time. And if these don't turn into flowers, I don't know what will. They clearly are different from the leaf buds, and you can even see the flowers already. So this is a relatively early bloomer, and one branch here seems to be attempting to give us fruit this year. Really exciting. Beurre super fin. thought to be a really superior flavored pear.